My name is Gavin Evans, and this is a list of 10 movies from 2021 that you probably haven't seen that you should check out. And I'm just going to keep this list to 10 movies, otherwise, I'm going on all day. This way, the list is more precise and it's in no particular order. And also, I don't want this to be a long video. I'm just going to bring up some movies, talk about what I liked, what I didn't like, and move on to the next. So, short and sweet. But the first movie I'm going to talk about is The Night House. This is a movie I reviewed back in August. And even though it's not a great movie, it does start to fall apart in the last act. I do think up until then, it's a very effective horror movie. There's plenty of tension and atmosphere, and some of the best jump scares I've seen in a very long time. Rebecca Hall does a great job in this movie, and I like the mystery element that arises in the second act. So overall, I did enjoy this movie quite a bit. The next movie I'm going to talk about is Wish Dragon, which is a movie that came out and nobody watched it or talked about it at all. And I think it's a real shame because this is one of my favorite animated movies of 2021. Is it the most original, amazing movie ever? No. But I still think it's enjoyable. Any anime movie that has a genie in it is going to get inevitably compared to Aladdin, but I do think this movie switches up the formula enough times so it doesn't just feel like a beat by beat ripoff, it does feel like its own thing at an eventual point. There were moments where they subverted the formula in very pleasing ways. But I like the main characters, I like the friendship between the man and the woman, I thought they had good chemistry, I like the friendship that forms between the guy and the genie, I thought that was a really well done element, and I like the character of the genie a lot because you really start to understand his viewpoint on humanity at a certain point, and I thought it gave the movie a surprising amount of depth. I like some of the exaggerated humor, and it does have some really funny moments. It's not a great movie, but it's consistently enjoyable, and I do recommend you check it out. The next movie I'm going to talk about is The Map of Tiny Perfect Things, which is another movie in the Groundhog Day subgenre. It's kind of funny how Groundhog Day has become its own genre of movies. I mean, you've got Before I Fall, Edge of Tomorrow, Palm Springs, Happy Death Day. There's a bunch of them now, and it's just like we get one or two of them every single year. And it just surprises me that this subgenre is blowing up the way it is. But this is another charming entry into that subgenre. Is it exceptional? No. But I do like the two main characters. I think they have enough chemistry where I could get on board with the romance. It's got some sweet moments, some charming moments, some funny moments, and it never goes above that. There is some suspension of disbelief that's required while watching it because they try to explain stuff through this made-up logic, but at an eventual point, you're just like, okay, no, this doesn't make any sense. So it's an enjoyable movie. Go into it with that mindset, and I think you'll be pleasantly surprised. The next movie I'm going to talk about, I think, is one of my very first reviews I ever did, and that's for the movie Oxygen. This movie caught me by surprise, not just because I didn't hear about it before, but also because for the first two acts of this movie, I didn't really care for it. I thought it was a very one-note movie that we've seen plenty like it. But there's actually some twists in the last act that really worked for me. I think it added depth to this movie as it explored the idea of identity and memories in a very compelling way. It manages to be very tense throughout. I think the main performance is great. It's well directed by Alexandre Aja. And I do think by the end it's a really good movie. I believe I gave it an 8 out of 10 and my rating system has changed since then. So I'd probably give it a 6 out of 10, but it's still one you should check out. The next movie I'm going to talk about is a movie called Bowling Point. This is a movie starring Stephen Graham, and it's about people working in a restaurant. That's it. There's not a lot of story or character arcs going on, but in just trying to create a certain atmosphere, trying to recreate a certain environment, I just think this movie excels at it. I've never worked at a restaurant, but after watching this movie, I feel like I know what it's like. You feel the stress, the frustrations, and just how the personal drama can get in the way of work sometimes. And I think for a movie about almost nothing, this is a very entertaining movie. It's incredibly well directed, and the blocking in it is absolutely magnificent. Like, I don't know if it is one shot, it might be one shot, and if it is, like, they go back and forth so many times, and if you're watching the background, you can see at the very beginning there's a customer waiting at a table, and then 20 minutes later you see him finally getting his food, and then 20 minutes later you see him leaving, and there was just something about it that felt really realistic to me. So I think this was a very well made movie, and one that I feel like nobody saw, and you should definitely go out and find it because it is a really good movie. The next movie I'm going to talk about isn't as vague as that. It's a movie that lots of people know about, but I feel like nobody saw it, and the people who did really hated it. So it's Don't Breathe 2, and this is a movie I enjoyed. Is it great? No. Is it as good as the original? No, but I think it's a very entertaining thriller. Let's just get the obvious out of the way. Yes, the main character is a piece of garbage. He's a terrible, awful person. But at no point do I feel like the movie's trying to make him look like a good guy. He just is the lesser of two evils in this specific situation. He's still an evil guy. He still gets his comeuppance. At no point is it trying to be like, yeah, just forget everything in the first movie. He's good now. No, and I don't even think he's a character we're supposed to root for. I think we're supposed to root for the main girl. Now, I will say that I don't think the acting in this movie is great. I do have some issues with the script, but I think as being a well-made, entertaining thriller, this movie is quite good at that. There's some really well-made sequences. It had me on edge throughout. And the last act of this movie is really tense and really brutal, so I ended up enjoying it. The next movie I'm going to talk about is Old Henry. Now, this is just a very simple movie with a very simple plot, and it's fully aware of it. But I think it's effective at that. It's an effective slow burn with a good payoff at the end. I think Tim Blake Nelson is absolutely fantastic in this movie. In fact, I would have been okay if he got nominated for awards because I kind of think he deserved it. I think it's a very well shot, well directed movie. And it's one that I don't have a lot to say. Like, there's not a lot of depth to it. There's not a lot to the characters. But for being what this movie is, I think it does a good job. And it's one I was definitely entertained by. The next movie I'm going to talk about is going to be my most controversial movie on this list. And it's Paranormal Activity Next of Kin. Now, the fact that this movie came out directly to streaming made it just fade into the background to the point where most mainstream audience members don't know this movie even exists. And lots of the people who did watch it destroyed it, hated it. It got terrible reviews. And people were just like, oh, it's the same old formula. And I couldn't disagree more. I think this movie switches up the formula in a very effective manner in the last act, in a way that really surprised me. I think it's a movie that builds very well, and the payoff to me was quite satisfying. The location of an Amish village in the woods during the winter time was just something so drastically different from every other location we've seen in this franchise to the point where it did make it feel fresh. Like Paranormal Activity 1, 2, 3, 4, marked ones, 5, they all take place in a house that looks slightly different than the last house we saw. Everything about this movie looks different and feels different. It's lots of the same tropes, but in a new environment, and I think it works really well, and they still found a way to surprise me in the last act with the directions they took. It's not the most effective, terrifying movie ever made, but it's one I definitely enjoyed, and I don't think it deserved the hate it got. I think it deserves more praise, so that's why I put it on this list. The next movie I'm going to talk about is Psycho Goreman, which... it's something alright. It's very unique and unlike anything else that comes out nowadays. I love the effects of this movie. Like, they're so gross and slimy, and they just get under my skin. I think you've got yourself a great dumb and goofy story. But that said, though, I think this movie also crosses that line from fun, dumb, and goofy to just ridiculously stupid, dumb, and goofy. Like, the last act of this movie did not work for me in any way. And they clearly wanted the main character to be unlikable. And I think they just did way too good of a job at that. Just really hated her. But no, this is an entertaining movie. It's unique, it's got some funny moments, and it's got some great effects. It's a great old school blast of a movie that I do recommend. But the last movie that I'm going to go ahead and recommend that you seek out and watch is another movie that got released directly to Netflix, and I feel like absolutely nobody saw this movie, and I think it's a real shame, and it's a classic horror story. I really like this movie. It gave me the vibes of Evil Dead and Cabin in the Woods and the Blair Witch Project in all the best ways. I think it's a very well-made movie that supports expectation in a smart way. It's tense and atmospheric when needed, and when the places the story evolves to really worked on a thematic level for me. This is one of those Netflix movies that I know is never going to come out on Blu-ray, and that really bums me out because I really enjoyed this movie quite a bit. So those are 10 movies from 2021 that you probably haven't seen that I think you should go ahead and check out. Have you seen any of those 10 movies? Do you have any movies from 2021 that most people probably haven't seen that you think people should check out? That was a really long whatever. But let me know in the comments down below. Make sure you like, make sure you comment, make sure you subscribe. Stay tuned for some more videos soon. And Gavin out.